Welcome to Infidelity Tales. If you're new, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. It only takes a second, but it gives us motivation to create more stories. So please like this video, and now let's start the story. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. I grew up in a small town with dreams of a simple, happy life. I married my college sweetheart, Adam, when we were both young and full of hope. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough, or so I thought. Looking back, I can now see the signs of what was coming, but at the time, I couldn't have imagined it. I met Mr. Thompson, our landlord, when Adam and I first moved into the small house we rented. The house wasn't much, but it was ours. It had a cozy charm, a little garden, and a small backyard that I adored. Adam and I were both excited about this new chapter in our lives. Mr. Thompson was an older man, in his early 60s. He had a friendly face, always smiling when we met him. He was the kind of landlord who would check in every once in a while to make sure everything was okay with the house. I remember the first time he came by to fix a broken fence. He was so polite, asking if we needed anything, and always making small talk about how the neighborhood had changed over the years. I didn't think much of it back then. He was just a friendly, older man. But things slowly started to change. Adam's job took him out of town more often, and I found myself spending more time alone at the house. It was during these times that I began to notice Mr. Thompson in a different light. He would stop by unannounced more often, sometimes to check on the house, sometimes just to chat. At first I thought it was harmless. After all, he was our landlord. But as time went on, I began to feel something shift in our conversations. One afternoon, I was gardening in the backyard when Mr. Thompson stopped by. He'd been coming over more frequently, and though I didn't mind his company, something about his visits began to feel off. He was always so kind, but there was an underlying intensity to his attention that made me uneasy. On that particular afternoon, he stayed longer than usual. We talked about the weather, the garden, and eventually about life. It was in those moments that I began to sense a different kind of interest in his demeanor. "Are you happy here?" he asked me that day, looking at me in a way that made me feel a bit exposed. I wasn't sure how to answer. Of course I was happy with Adam, but I had started to feel a distance between us, especially with his long hours at work. There were times when I felt alone, even when he was home, but I didn't want to admit that to Mr. Thompson, not out loud. I smiled and nodded, trying to push the thought away, but Mr. Thompson didn't let it go. "Sometimes," he said, "it's easy to forget how important it is to have someone to talk to feel like someone's really listening." I couldn't explain it, but the way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. His words lingered in the air long after he left. I brushed it off, telling myself that it was just a harmless conversation. But the more Mr. Thompson came around, the more I started to notice subtle shifts in his behavior. His compliments, once innocent, began to carry a weight I wasn't used to. He'd comment on how nice I looked, how well I took care of myself, how well I maintained the house. At first I thought he was just being kind, but soon it felt like he was noticing things that no one else did. One evening, Adam was away on a business trip. It was a quiet night, and I was curled up on the couch with a book when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before answering. When I opened the door, there stood Mr. Thompson, with a smile on his face. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said. "Thought I'd stop by and make sure everything was all right." I smiled politely, stepping back to let him in. It had become normal for him to stop by unannounced, so I didn't think much of it. He walked into the living room, and we began talking, just as we always did. But this time I felt a strange tension in the air. There was something about the way he looked at me that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't anything overt, Just a look, a lingering gaze, but it was enough to make my heart race. As we talked, Mr. Thompson sat closer to me than usual. I could feel the space between us shrinking, and the weight of his presence became more palpable. I remember laughing awkwardly at something he said, trying to brush off the growing discomfort in my chest. I told myself that he was just being friendly, that I was overreacting. But then, as if sensing my discomfort, Mr. Thompson leaned in slightly and placed his hand gently on the arm of the couch. "You know," he said, "it's rare to meet someone like you. Someone who really listens. Someone who truly cares." The words seemed innocent enough, but there was something in his tone, something in the way he said them, that made my skin crawl. I wanted to move away, to tell him that I was uncomfortable, but I didn't. Instead, I laughed nervously and pulled my legs up to my chest, trying to create some distance between us, even if it was just physical. Mr. Thompson noticed the shift in my posture, and for a moment, there was silence between us. He looked at me, his eyes soft, but there was a sharpness behind them that I couldn't ignore. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his voice low. I just wanted you to know that you're appreciated. You're a very special person, Sarah." The way he said my name made my breath catch. My heart pounded in my chest, and I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but I couldn't find the words. It was as if I was trapped in the moment, frozen in place. Before I could say anything, Mr. Thompson stood up. "Well, I should let you get back to your evening," he said, smiling again, though there was something strange in the smile, something I couldn't place. "Just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." I nodded, my throat dry, and watched as he left the house. When the door clicked shut behind him, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. I sat there staring at the door for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I'd never felt so conflicted in my life. Part of me wanted to tell Adam what had been going on, but another part of me was too ashamed, too afraid of what he might think. I didn't want to cause problems. I didn't want to make him doubt me, or worse, make him angry. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't ignore the way Mr. Thompson was making me feel. It wasn't right, and I didn't want to encourage it. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his visits than he was letting on. What was I supposed to do? As the days passed, Mr. Thompson's visits became more frequent. Each time he came by, I felt that same sense of discomfort and unease. I tried to brush it off, but it was becoming harder to ignore. There was something about him that made my pulse quicken, and I couldn't figure out why. I knew I had to be careful, that I couldn't let things get out of hand. But I also knew that deep down, something was changing. I just didn't know yet how deep it would go. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Mr. Thompson and me only grew. I still hadn't told Adam about the strange interactions with our landlord. Part of me feared that he wouldn't understand, or worse, that he'd get angry and upset with me. After all, I was just trying to be friendly, wasn't I? It was just small talk, nothing more, right? That's what I told myself each time Mr. Thompson showed up at the house, unannounced, trying to brush off my growing unease. But the unease wasn't something I could easily ignore anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Mr. Thompson had looked at me, the way he had touched the armrest of the couch during that one visit, as if he were trying to make a connection that wasn't just neighborly or landlord-tenant related. I would catch myself replaying the moment over and over in my mind, each time the tension growing within me. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when I found myself alone in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. I had always enjoyed cooking, but tonight it felt like more of a chore than a comfort. My thoughts were elsewhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I was just starting to season the chicken when I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. My heart skipped a beat. I looked out the kitchen window, and sure enough, there was Mr. Thompson standing at the door, his usual warm smile on his face. I hadn't seen him in a couple of days, and although I should have been relieved, I felt a strange knot form in my stomach. I wiped my hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. "Good evening, Sarah," Mr. Thompson said cheerfully as I opened it. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, not at all," I replied, forcing a smile. I stepped aside to let him in, and he entered the house without hesitation, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. He glanced around, his eyes briefly settling on the kitchen, where I'd been preparing dinner. "Smells wonderful in here," he commented, his gaze lingering on the meal I was making. "You're quite the cook." I nodded politely, not really sure how to respond. "It's just something simple for dinner, nothing special." "You always say that," Mr. Thompson chuckled. "But you have a way of making the simplest things seem extraordinary." The compliment was nice, I supposed, but it felt different coming from him. It wasn't like the compliments I had heard from friends, or even Adam. There was a weight to them, as if he was seeing something in me that wasn't just about the food or the house. I felt myself growing uneasy again, but I tried to push the feeling away. "Thank you," I said, brushing it off. "Do you need anything? I assume you're here to check on something?" Mr. Thompson's expression shifted slightly. He seemed to hesitate before responding. "Well, actually, I was wondering if we could talk for a moment. It's been a while since we've had a chance to have a proper conversation." I was surprised. We had always exchanged pleasantries when he came by, but we had never sat down for a long conversation. I knew he had been in the area a lot lately, but I hadn't expected him to want to talk more deeply. I felt a flash of anxiety, but nodded anyway. "Sure, we can sit down." I led him to the living room and gestured for him to take a seat on the couch. I sat across from him, on the chair where I usually sat when Adam and I watched TV. There was an awkward silence before Mr. Thompson spoke again, his tone more serious than I had ever heard it before. "You know," he began slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about life recently, about how things change over time. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, to lose sight of what really matters." I wasn't sure where he was going with this. "I know what you mean," I said cautiously. "Life can get busy, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of what's important." Mr. Thompson nodded, his eyes searching mine. "Exactly. But it's also important to remember that sometimes we need to take a step back and make sure we're truly living, not just going through the motions." There was something about his words that made me feel uneasy, but I didn't know how to respond. I had no idea what he was implying, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Sarah," he said softly, leaning forward just slightly. "I don't know how to explain this, but I felt a connection with you ever since I met you. A special connection that I haven't been able to ignore. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about our conversations, the way you carry yourself. You're a remarkable woman, and it's hard to put into words just how much I admire you." I felt my breath catch in my throat. His words were kind, but they felt like a confession. Something about the way he said them made my heart race, but not in a good way. I suddenly felt trapped, unsure of how to react. My mind raced for something to say, anything to diffuse the tension that was now palpable in the room. I don't know what to say," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate the compliment, Mr. Thompson, but I'm married. I have a husband who I love very much." He didn't seem fazed by my words. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice almost apologetic. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, Sarah, but I also don't want to pretend that I don't feel what I feel." His words were like a jolt of electricity running through me. I had heard him express admiration for me before, but this was different. There was something deeper in his gaze, something more intense. I felt a mix of fear and confusion flood through me. This wasn't just a friendly landlord checking in anymore. This was something else, something I wasn't sure how to handle. "I don't want to cause any problems between you and your husband," Mr. Thompson continued, "but I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel drawn to you. I just had to tell you how I felt." I didn't know what to say. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't want to hurt him, but I also didn't want to give him any false hope. What was I supposed to do in this situation? How could I make him understand that I was married and not interested in pursuing anything outside of my relationship with Adam? Finally, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mr. Thompson," I said firmly, "I understand that you're being honest, but I need to be clear with you. I'm married, and I'm committed to my husband. I appreciate your kindness, but I'm not interested in anything more than a landlord-tenant relationship." There was a long pause, and I could see the disappointment flicker in his eyes. He looked down at his hands, then nodded slowly. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. That was never my intention." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The tension between us seemed to dissipate, but it left behind a lingering unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same again, that Mr. Thompson's feelings for me would continue to exist, whether I acknowledged them or not. He stood up, and I followed suit. "Thank you for listening," he said, his voice still soft but carrying a hint of sadness. "I'll leave you to your evening. Please know that I respect your boundaries, Sarah. I just wanted you to know how I felt." I forced a smile, trying to hide the unease still bubbling inside me. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," I said. "I'll see you around." As he walked out of the door, I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where he had been. My thoughts were a whirlwind. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I was married to Adam, and yet I had just had this conversation with our landlord. What was going on, and why did it feel like my entire world was slowly unraveling? I shook my head, trying to push away the doubts. I had to focus on my life with Adam, to remember the love and commitment we shared. But a small, nagging feeling deep inside told me that this was far from over. After that conversation with Mr. Thompson, I tried to push the entire situation out of my mind. I didn't want it to affect my relationship with Adam, and I definitely didn't want to complicate things with our landlord any further. But even though I buried my feelings, they didn't disappear. The guilt and confusion lingered, and I found myself constantly second-guessing the interaction. A few days later, Mr. Thompson showed up unexpectedly again. My heart tightened in my chest when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't ready for another awkward conversation, but I knew I had to face it head on. I opened the door, trying to keep my composure. "Hello, Sarah," he greeted me, his voice warm but careful. "I just wanted to check in and make sure everything's still good with the house." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, Mr. Thompson. Thanks for asking." He seemed to hesitate before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about what I said last time. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I understand your boundaries and I respect that. I just didn't want to leave things unsaid." I looked at him for a long moment, feeling the weight of the words he had spoken. I had to be firm now. There was no room for uncertainty. Thank you for understanding, I replied, but I need to be clear. I'm married. My focus is on my marriage with Adam, and I can't allow any distractions. I value our professional relationship, but that's where it ends. Mr. Thompson's expression softened, but there was still a hint of sadness in his eyes. He nodded slowly, accepting my words without protest. I understand, he said quietly. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief. It's okay. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. He gave a small, respectful nod and turned to leave. As he walked away, I stood in the doorway, watching him go, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt sad that it had to come to this, but another part was grateful that I had finally set the boundaries I needed. That evening, Adam and I sat down to dinner, and for the first time in a while, I felt truly present. The events of the past weeks weighed on me, but I knew that I had to move forward. I had to focus on what mattered, my family, my commitment to Adam, and the love we shared. Everything okay? Adam asked, noticing I was quieter than usual. I smiled, trying to push the lingering thoughts aside. Yeah, just thinking. It's good to have you home. He smiled back, squeezing my hand. It's good to be home. In that moment, I realized that no matter the confusion or the complexity of human emotions, my priority was clear. I had to protect the relationship I had with Adam. I wasn't going to let anything or anyone get in the way of that. And I knew, no matter what, we would get through it together.